What is going on, guys? It's the Mad Dragon. So a couple of days ago, I did the Northern Hemisphere Team of the Year video, having a look at which players impressed me throughout the season, creating a 23-man team. And today, it is time to do the same with the Southern Hemisphere teams. Now, like I did in that video, there is going to be some special rules I apply to Team of the Year and Team of the Week and stuff, just so that they're not all the same on YouTube. There's a bit of different variance, and we get to show a bit of love and appreciation for some other players that maybe not got mentioned because of their stats, but generally who impressed me the most. So I'll pop on screen real quickly the rules that I'm going to be following, and as always, I absolutely welcome anyone watching now to follow these rules, try and create your own 23-man team following these rules, and drop down in the comment section who got into your team of the year. So starting out with rule 1, I've picked players based on how they've impressed me throughout the year and not necessarily just based on their stats. I'm not just looking at a website and saying who got the most meters, therefore they're the best winger. It's just people who impressed me throughout the year, and if they impressed me for whatever reason, they're in my team of the year. Rule number 2, players can only be picked based on their shirt numbers they have worn throughout the year and cannot move positions. So this means if there's 5 people that played amazing on the left wing and nobody played well on the right wing, I can't just move a winger across. They have to have played in that shirt number for the majority of the year. Now, I am aware, especially in the Southern Hemisphere compared to the Northern Hemisphere, there's a lot of players who like to switch around positions. So what I've done in those instances is I've gone away and I've tallied up how many games they played in each shirt, and the shirt number they wore the most is the one they're competing for to get into the team of the year. I'm going to be picking a 23-man squad. 15 are, in my opinion, the number 1 picks that I've got there, but the rest that are going to be on like the subs bench or the replacements bench are the people that narrowly missed out, who genuinely probably could have been in that starting 15, but I've done it like a rugby team format because I think that's more fun. And then finally, I will be giving reasons as to why I picked the players, and also be listing honourable mentions in those same positions who I had some real tough thoughts about who I was going to be picking, and maybe go over some reasons why I haven't picked those players. So don't be one of those people that just clicks to the end of the video to see the final team and then gets in the comment section to complain about that I forgot somebody. There is reasons why I've picked these people, and I'll go through them in the video. So let's get started then. In the tight head position, I had 2 names written down for this one. Quite a tough call. Eventually, I went for Thomas Gaggio from Argentina, who this year has been really, really good. An absolute unit of a human being. Absolutely crushing it in terms of ball carrying, smashing his way through, got himself over the try line a couple of times, especially across that rugby championship, which is really nice to see props getting over for a try. So that's why I went for him. Close runner-up here in terms of honourable mention, Stephen Kitchoff from South Africa. Thought it was real tight between these two. I can imagine people might interchange this one. The South African front row, to be fair, has been pretty good this year on the whole. So he was a close runner-up for me in the honourable mentions list. On to the hookers then. A real tough one. It's quite surprising. This is the first year I've covered like Southern Hemisphere teams on the channel. And it's quite interesting to see the difference between Northern and Southern Hemisphere teams. Basically every team has really good hookers. So it's been a really tough choice. I had to go through the list, and eventually I settled on Malcolm Marx, who just this year blew me away. He was always put on the bench for most of the games that I saw he came on, and made a massive impact from every game he came on from the bench with. This is the first year I've seen him starting more games, and he's just awesome. He's just awesome for a massive chunk of the game. No matter if he plays in that first half or second half, absolutely crushing it, and he has impressed me. I think there's a big competition at the minute for whether he's maybe the best hooker in the world. I've been really, really impressed by him this year. So he gets my hooker position, but some honourable mentions along the way. Talkiaho from New Zealand, absolutely crushing it in terms of the number of tries he's been scoring, working the back of that maul like crazy, just smashing through tackles as well with the ball in hand. Julian Montoya from Argentina, just awesome in terms of the defensive ability. We saw how many jackals he got across the year. Just, gets himself involved, gets over that ball, winning penalties, allowing people like Boffelli to get 3 points. So many of them coming from Montoya's turnovers. And finally, Fainga'a from Australia, who, unfortunately, there was not a great deal of Australian players, bit of a spoiler alert in this list, because of how many injuries they've had and how many people they've had to swap out and lack of game time for a lot of players. But Fainga'a has come onto the game. Every game I've seen him, giving it his all. The line-out situation with them has been pretty good, considering they haven't had a lot of locks, and he's managing to lead from the front, as well as him getting himself over that whitewash a couple of times as well. So yeah, real competitive in the hooker position. On to tight head then. Two names for me here. The one I went for eventually was Frans Malherbe. Like I said already, that South African front row has just been awesome this year. Malherbe is just a gritty prop, just gets himself in, another big boy. He's been doing really well in terms of the scrummaging, the amount of penalties he's winning in the scrums. It's not really that they're just sort of running through penalties, but just winning the penalty is sometimes all you need, and he's an absolute trooper for it. As well as generally round the park, I think he's really good. The honourable mention for this one, I gave to Alan Alatoa, another one who has been a bit of a staple in an Australia team, suffering with a lot of injuries this year. He's been coming on. We saw that fantastic image of him with Eben Etzebeth getting into it, brings a fiery passion to every game. Absolutely trying to get involved with terms of the scrummaging work. Massive collisions every game, ball carrying really nice from him, so I gave him an honourable mention there. On to the lock department then. Wow, there's a lot of people swapping around in shirt numbers in the lock, so really tough to get a couple of these down. In terms of the number 4 shirt, I only had one, and it went to Eben Etzebeth, who has been absolutely crushing it again. I've said for quite a while about Eben Etzebeth. The only problem with him was how many penalties he gave away. And this year, I've really seen him sort of dial it down. He's taken a bit of a step back. His game's got a lot more professional, minus if you're having a bit of a fight with Alan Alatoa over on the side of the pitch. But less penalties coming from his way. The line-out's been really secure. Ball carrying's been awesome. Becoming a much more rounded team player, as well as just excelling at the stuff you expect him to do. He's a bit of a giant man, doing really well. Maybe you could have picked someone like Alamano in here as well, but there was quite a few cards, there's quite a few penalties. New Zealand locks are swapping around a lot, and the Australian locks suffering with injuries, swapping in and out. So kind of hard to gauge other people, but I think Eben Etzebeth absolutely deserved it there. In the 5 shirt was a bit more competitive. This one eventually I gave to Sam Whitelock. There was a lot of tallying up I had to do here, because Sam Whitelock was playing at 5 when he was playing alongside Brodie Retallick. He was playing at 4 when he was playing alongside Scott Barrett. Sometimes Scott Barrett would be at 6 and he'd move around. There was a lot of tallying to do. Eventually he did settle on that he was in the number 5 shirt, so that's why I've given it to Sam Whitelock here. But another good year for him. Again, the line-out situation for New Zealand been very good. He's a very steady hand when it comes to the line-out. Leadership qualities as well coming in there. Now, he doesn't really get to sort of captain the team an awful lot when he gets to New Zealand, but he definitely has that leadership role about it. You can see him organising the forwards, trying to set up plans. I think he's done really well this year. Honourable mentions for me, Catherine Neville, who was a surprise name for me coming into this year. A brand new name for me, learning a lot about him. I think he's been quite influential in quite a lot of the games. We did see him get that try against Italy that nearly led to them being able to actually steal that game away from Italy. I think he's done a good job considering how many issues they've had with the lock department. I thought he really came in, made a big impact. The only thing for there was number of penalties. Again, he's had a card or two along the way, so I didn't go for him there. And then finally, Lou Diaga, who has moved around a little bit, doing the lock and flanker and stuff. He has moved around a little bit. But again, I thought another good year for them. The South African line-out's been pretty solid, to be fair. But overall, I went for Sam Whitelock. On to the blind side then. Man, there was a couple of names in here actually, and a couple of surprise names. This one might catch people out here. I imagine a lot of people are probably thinking like Khaleesi. He was one of the names I wrote down here. Jed Holloway was another one I thought was quite impressive this year, to be fair. He's seen him get involved in some massive charge downs in terms of box kicks coming over, making a big impact into the game. But the name I finally settled on here was Gonzalez from Argentina. The back row from Argentina really working hard this year. They've had some really tough games. They've had to go through tough graft to get there. The tackle rate from basically the entire back row from Argentina has been pretty solid all year. But the attacking prowess that Gonzalez has offered, getting himself huge line breaks out of nowhere, absolutely no way he should be allowed to get through there. We've seen him out on the wing. We've seen him get over the try line. He's been awesome in terms of tackling. And I think all year has gone a little bit unnoticed. I haven't heard a lot of people talking about how well he's done this year. So for me, I've gone for Gonzalez, but I could absolutely see some other people maybe wanting to go for Khaleesi here, who again had another good year. And Jed Holloway, another name, but probably just game time for me in terms of Jed Holloway, as well as the fact he was playing between the 4 shirt and the 6 shirt, depending on the game. Onto the open side then. 3 names written down here. One of them I'm not entirely sure of, because of course I've been following the Southern Hemisphere team for the first time this year. Eventually I settled on Kramer from Argentina. Again, a lot of the same reasons for Gonzalez, but this one more so in terms of the defense. Kramer has been absolutely crushing it. He plays like a full 70, 75, 80 minutes and just tackles constantly face first, shoulder first, doesn't care. He's had his own bout of penalties and stuff going against him, but I just think the tackle rate he's been working with, I think the percentage rate of tackles he's been making as well has been absolutely fantastic. I think he's been a massive reason why Argentina have been able to win so many games and concede less points. Has just been the ability for him to tackle in the game. Honourable mentions here, Dalton Papali'i. Again, I thought he had another good year. I haven't quite seen him pop off the way that I saw when I was watching the Super Rugby Aotearoa, watching him play for the Blues and seeing him score tries in like every game. That was a couple of years back now, but he hasn't really quite popped off the same way in that New Zealand team. A few penalties going his way, but I think he's been playing well overall. And then the final honourable mention that I had in here, Quagga Smith. Now, I wasn't entirely sure because Quagga Smith, for whatever reason, starts like every game on the bench. Trying to see who he's coming on for, because I think he can play flanker or number 8, and it does sort of swap over depending what game it is, so it's quite hard for me to pin down what specific position he plays in. I've put him in that number 7 shirt while he competes for that, but I thought an honourable mention here because Quagga Smith is a really underrated player, especially over here in the Northern Hemisphere. I don't hear a lot of people talk about him at all, but he comes on from that bench and genuinely shifts up the game every game. I think he's an absolutely brilliant player. Unfortunately for him, coming on from the bench does mean he only seems to get about half hour of most games in. So just sort of game time, I sort of knocked him down. And the fact I'm still not entirely sure what position he technically prefers, because he just seems to come on basically anywhere you want him to. But overall, I've gone for Kramer in the open side flanker. In the number 8, I mean, there's a name here. I'm sure this will be a name a lot of people have. Ardie Savea is going to be taking the number 8 shirt. Been absolutely superb. I mean, the fact that this lad wasn't up there for Player of the Year with some of the impacts he's had in these games absolutely astonished me. I think he's an absolutely monster player this year. I have said in the past about Ardie Savea, I actually thought he was a bit overrated. If you go back 2-3 years ago, maybe before I had the channel, people used to talk about Ardie Savea, and I used to think he's a perfectly fine number 8, but people used to talk about him like he was, doing absolutely phenomenal things. This year is the year I've seen him make that tremendous step up into just every game he's in. He's the man you want in your fantasy leagues. He's the man you want to be putting money on if you're betting to score a try. He's the man that's going to be getting the stats behind him. Absolutely superb this year. Honourable mentions, we've got to finish off the full 3 here. Pablo Matera. I think the back row from Argentina has been really good, to be fair. And then finally, Valentini. Who just every game, man's not afraid to die. Just charges at full speed, head full of steam, straight at whoever is in front of him. Seeing those crash balls go in. There has been a bit of interchange between him and like Pete Samu playing, so haven't gone down the Valentini route, but still think he deserves an honourable mention. In the scrum half shirt, another competitive shirt here. Eventually I settled on Aaron Smith. Because I think Aaron Smith is just awesome. I think he's such a good player. He's got a lot of caps behind him now. Very professional, very experienced player, but you do see the difference in that New Zealand speed from the back of the ruck when he comes on, the ability to get some of those bullet passes out, whether he's missing players, direct at players, flat line passes, he just picks the right pass so many times to do. New Zealand have had a couple of issues. I know Finlay Christie came in, he saw his box kicks not going right. Aaron Smith seems to be landing them every single time. I think it's been a real big movement as to why New Zealand have done so well this year, so I've gone for Aaron Smith. But honourable mentions, a lot across the board. Bertrano, I thought, had a massive impact on Argentina, being able to get that speed from the ruck as well. I thought he improved dramatically, as well as looking to go himself as well with a couple of balls, which is nice to see. Both Faf de Klerk and Hendrickse at different times. The problem for me was that they both played sort of half and half games. Faf de Klerk picked up an injury in the Rugby Championship, which sort of took him out for a few games. Hendrickse came in, has played well throughout the year as well, but I just think game time of swapping round to, well, Cobus Ryanak also got in there as well at some points. And then finally, Nick White, who has actually played very well. I mean, you've got to ignore the mustache tackle dive that he did on his own try line. That was a rough game to watch. But in terms of general impact into the game, he has actually been really good. He is probably still the number 1 choice for me in terms of an Australian scrum half. He also came on at one point and did an unbelievable kick from like a penalty from like the halfway line. Absolutely insane. Got on board, had to do it. They've suffered with their injuries across like fly halves as well. So sometimes you've got to have a scrum half stepper to do a kick. Absolutely managing to get into those top games, make the biggest impact he can. Thought he deserves an honourable mention too. On to the fly half then. 3 names written down here. Eventually, I've settled on a name that people might be surprised about. I've gone for Willemse. And the reason for this is the impact that he made into the game due to the fact that South Africa had so many injuries in terms of who could play that fly half position. And as someone that didn't really know Willemse had the capabilities of moving into that fly half shirt, I've only ever really seen him play at fullback. And I thought he stepped up fantastically. Came in, he had to play a number of games at fly half. He's not necessarily the most attacking fly half. It really does feel like he's not quite ready for that position. I think he's much more of a fullback. But the way he managed to use his distribution skills, looking for some interesting kicks over the top, he stepped up to the mark, and I think he played really well. Kicking percentage, not necessarily the highest it could have been, but I still think it was pretty consistent throughout the Rugby Championship, and then going on throughout the rest of the games. They did sort of hand it over to Colby at one point, who I think was doing worse than Valemsa. I probably would have left Valemsa at it, but I think for the impact he made through the injuries and the fact he was able to step up for the team, that's the reason why I gave him the fly half shirt. But a couple of honourable mentions. Richie Mwanga, in terms of the running game from New Zealand standpoint, just making breaks on himself, picking some really nice passes, making a big influence of the game, keeping other people out of the 10 shirt. Geordie Barrett, Bowden Barrett, they can both play at 10. He's keeping them out and, consistently playing extremely well, so I think he deserves a mention in there. And then finally, Carreras from Argentina, because when Sanchez went out, I really thought Argentina were in desperate trouble. He's such a big playmaker for them, such a well-organised sort of person. I really thought losing him in the fly half shirt was going to be a massive detriment to them, but I thought Carreras really stepped up in that Argentina team, filled in a bit of a void, not so much the kicking duties, but in terms of the general running play, organised himself at fly half. I thought he made a nice impact, so deserves a mention there. On to the left wing, and wingers. Whoa, wingers in Southern Hemisphere, really tough to pin down. I had to do an awful lot of tallying to see who played in what position the most in order to work out who was competing for this. And eventually it settles on one name for me that went to Caleb Clark. A lot of the impact due to what he was going on in terms of that Rugby Championship, just making massive meters, breaks down the wing, tackle breaks. We saw him knock out like 5 people with his hip, which was just an absolute monster of a lad. I had seen him play when he was playing at the Blues, and he's just a really solid all-round player. You could use him like a forward, gets himself in some of the mauls, and when he's going in the rucks, he's chucking other people behind him. He's a big unit. I think he's played extremely well this year. He was, I think, the top performing winger in the Fantasy League across the Rugby Championship as well in terms of number of points scored. Massive meters for him, massive tackle breaks. I think he was a really good player. There's a couple of names I think people will be like, whoa, how have you missed these names off on the winger? That's because they've tallied up to either be at fullback or on the wing, so we will get to them, don't worry about it. Inside centre, 2 names for me here, and I've settled on Geordie Barrett. And this was mainly down to just a fantastic ability to move. I mean, I've seen him play at fullback. I've seen him play on the wing. I have seen him play at fly half. And I remember when it came around that he was going to be moving to this inside centre position, I really thought he was going to crash and burn. I didn't know if he had the ability to play there. He didn't seem like the sort of player who had the play style for the inside centre in terms of that New Zealand team. And he has just flown in terms of that inside centre. He has played extremely well. I think is arguably better than most inside centres over in the Northern Hemisphere at this point. I think he's played absolutely tremendously. He's suited that role so well and truly impressed me with the way he's been playing those games. So I had to give it to him because I think he's made such a massive impact. I even think some of the stats back him as well in terms of the inside centres. He's done really well. Honourable mention here, I gave to Damien Dialende. Just in every week. I don't know how that man's not injured more. Just plays absolutely phenomenally in every single game. Crash ball, just running through, making big breaks on occasion when he can find the gaps. But he's just not afraid just to run through people. Fiery player, but made some big meters as well. But for me, I've gone for Geordie Barrett. Outside centre, a bit more competitive here. I had 3 names written down, but settled on one due to just the amount of game time played, and that is Rico Ioane. Who had another really good year. I mean, there was big talks about when he stopped playing on the left wing, he moved to that centre position, had to sort of retrain in a new position, got himself into that international side again, and he's played extremely well. Again, number of meters made across the year has been fantastic for him. We saw him in the Rugby Championship having some immense defence as well. Huge tackles coming in for him. Jackling on his own try line, saving tackles where the player got over the line. He managed to get under the ball. There was one game I seem to remember where he got like 3 in one game. Absolutely superb in defence as well as the attack. And when you see him have that room, there was one he had a little interlink with Caleb Clark and you saw him run around the wing. He's a hard man to stop, that backing from the winger training that he's had at some points as well. So for me, I've gone for Ioane, but definitely a couple of honourable mentions in here as well. Lukhanyo Am, who had a fantastic start to the year, thought he was doing really well for South Africa. He has been called the best centre in the world. The reason I haven't gone for him is just the amount of game time. He played all the way up until, I believe, round 3 of the Rugby Championship where he picked up his injury, and we haven't really seen him throughout the rest of the year. So you're sort of judging his performances on like the first few months of the year as opposed to the year in total. So that's why I haven't gone for him there. And then finally, Len Ikitau from Australia. Again, another lad I'm not hearing a lot from. Following the Rugby Championship, we had the Fantasy League on the go. He was scoring fantastically across that Rugby Championship. Thought he made fantastic work in terms of getting himself over the try line. Support play as a centre I thought was really good, and making some nice little breaks himself. But again, unfortunately for him, picked up an injury. There was a lot of switching out in that Australian centre department as well. So again, just time in the game meant I had to lean more towards Ioane. On to the right wing then. Oh man, this one is a personal opinion thing because there's some real tough competitors here. So eventually I have settled here on Boffelli, who was playing on the right wing. I had to do a lot of tallying to see where people played. Boffelli switching a lot between left wing and right wing. The reason I've gone for Boffelli is just what he has meant to the Argentina team this year. I think there's been games this year for Argentina that they don't win if Boffelli doesn't play the way he's been playing. The number of points scored from the boot, I think is like the highest over the course of the year in terms of the Southern Hemisphere teams. I think he's been absolutely superb. Some of those games just came down to just let him kick and we'll win through Boffelli. His running game as well has been really good. We've seen him get over the try line as well over the course of this year a number of times. Impact in the game I think has been fantastic. Again, with Sanchez dropping out, thought it was going to be a real issue. Stepped up to the mark, and from a general team perspective, I think he absolutely deserves to have that one. Now, a very close honourable mention here. This will be interchangeable for a lot of people here. Kurtley Rense, who, again, has been fantastic this year. People still complain about my pronunciations of him. I've tried about 12 different ones. People still complain. But I think he's been absolutely superb. In terms of a winger doing what wingers want to do, I can see a lot of people going for him here. Just number of tries he's been scoring has been absolutely awesome. The stepping, the running against so many teams. He just seems to just make these breaks from absolutely nothing. Been fantastic under the high ball, minus some card scenarios that we had against Bowden Barrett. But on the majority, been fantastic under the high ball. I think he was up there as well for like the most tries from like the Southern Hemisphere team as well. So I can absolutely imagine a couple of people going from there, but I'm looking at it more from a team perspective, which is why I've gone for Boffelli. And then finally, in the fullback position, a lot of fullbacks swapping around again across all the teams. Different people being tried on different positions. But I have gone for Willie Leroux from South Africa, who just came into the game again. Valemsa was sort of playing there, had to move in to that 10 position. Willie Leroux has come in and really settled that South African team down. I think he's playing absolutely fantastic in that fullback position. Been doing very clever little tactics, been working well with the team, but also kicking over the top, finding the room in the backfield, allowing other people to make those little breaks away. High up and under, he's been chasing well. He's been guarding that backfield extremely well. And in total, I think he's been absolutely phenomenal for South Africa this year. So that's why I've given it to him. So there we have it, guys. That is the 1 to 15. A nice little mix of players, to be fair, from different people that have impressed me over the year. Australia, unfortunately, the only people to not get like a player in the team. That's mainly down to like the injuries and game time they've had. We sort of had the same thing with England in the Northern Hemisphere video. I didn't have any England players, and it's not through deciding against them. It's just there's just different people in different positions. I think I exceeded them a bit. So now we'll move on quickly and take a look at the subs as we did in the Northern Hemisphere video. I've sort of already mentioned a lot of these lads. These are lads that sort of narrowly missed out, and I think a lot of people might want to just interchange them from my 1 to 15 anyway. So in terms of the subs, replacement hooker Taukiaho, for the reasons I sort of mentioned earlier on, I think he played absolutely phenomenally this year. I can imagine he might be in a lot of different people's team of the years. Replacement props, Kitshoff, because I think he's been awesome in terms of scrummaging. It could have been a South African front row, to be fair, in the team of the year. I think all three of them played well. So not surprised if a couple of people had him in there. Alan Alatoa. So we have got some Australians in, I guess, technically, but not in that starting 15. Again, for that work he's been doing in that tight head position. Lou Diaga takes my replacement lock position, because I think that line out for South Africa has been really solid as well, and he's played a massive part in that. The replacement forwards to go alongside him, Khaleesi, I gave this one to, for the reasons sort of mentioned earlier on, just massive impact into the game, leadership that we've seen from him. Some of the tackling displays as well from him have been absolutely phenomenal, just taking people down out of nowhere. Replacement scrum half, Nick White. Again, just for being able to be relied upon for this one for me, in terms of like when he saw him take on those kicks when he needed to. We had a couple of situations, there was 2 scrum halves, he had to swap over, had to play a totally different position. I think he's been a massive influence for the team. Replacement fly half was Richie Mwanga. again, for those sort of single plays and the running game that I sort of said earlier in the video. And then finally, Arensa gets that back position because genuinely it was so close between him and Boffelli. It just depends how you're viewing who gets into your team of the year, but I think he deserves to be in my bench list. But there we have it, guys. That is going to be my Southern Hemisphere team of the year. Like I said, drop it down in the comments who made your team of the year, because it's really fun to have a look through everyone else's. And we will be doing on the community polls soon. You can go check out the Northern Hemisphere team if you want to. What I'll be doing on the community polls over the next few days, I'm going to be putting up who should be in the team of the year video from the subscriber standpoint. So I'll put my first choice Northern Hemisphere pick and my first choice Southern Hemisphere pick, and then I'll add a third option for you guys to name someone completely different. If you disagreed with both of my team of the years, I'll go through, I'll tally them up, I'll do my own team of the year mixed with your subscriber team of the year, and we can compare them side by side, and we can see which team we think is better, which will probably be your guys, because... But there we are, guys. I hope you've all enjoyed this one today. If you wanted to see this video sooner, you could have gone over to the Patreon. Christmas is coming up. If you are in the festive spirit and want to support the channel, you can head over to the Patreon. Link is in the description, and you can support the channel that way and get yourself early access to videos such as this. I hope you've all enjoyed this one today, guys. I will see you all next time. Bye bye.